A good mineral program for your cattle is proving to be a good return on investment if you use it.
The best mineral in the world isn't doing much if it's not eaten, but also the best mineral in the world isn't doing much if it's still sitting on the pallet in the shed.
Dr. Jason Russell with Zenpro joins me today as we talk about where and how you can see the value in a mineral program for your cows, as well as those forgotten animals on the place, the bulls.
And we're talking a few months before, right? Spermatogenesis takes 61 days. We need to be improving mineral to those bulls long before that.
Plus, a great conversation with Casey Corrales about the American Akaushi breed of cattle and the market demand we're seeing for Wagyu beef on this episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. And we welcome you here to another edition of the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills. We're glad to have you joining us, coming to you all the way from the northeast corner of Wyoming, where we've yet to see a stem of green grass show up just yet. And I was talking with meteorologist Don Day. In fact, we'll talk with him at the end of our program about these cooler temperatures that we're seeing, and it is stifling the growing season a bit, but nevertheless, it is also bringing moisture, and we'll hear what the forecast is for the next 7 to 10 days out when he joins us here in the latter part of our program. But for today's show, we're going to be covering just a couple different topics, as Dr. Jason Russell with Zenpro will be joining us. He is their technical beef nutritionist, but we're going to be talking about a mineral program. And if you know me at all, I have always touched a lot in our programs about less is more, and really trying to be very economy minded and strategic in the inputs that we put in our livestock. And today that focus is not any different, but we're going to be focusing on this from the mineral perspective, and I can tell you my perspective on it has changed over the years, and we're going to talk with Dr. Russell about the importance of looking at a good mineral program for your cattle, so be sure to join us for that. Also later in our show, Casey Corrales, she is the executive director of the American Akaushi Association. She'll be joining us as we're going to be talking about the Akaushi breed, and of course we have definitely seen the interest in Wagyu beef out there, and we're going to talk about Akaushi. It's what they're doing as a breed association, but also if you're wondering when I say Akaushi and Wagyu, is that the same thing? Well, we're going to talk about the difference between Akaushi and Wagyu, those two different terms as they are, and so a lot to be learned here today as in our interview with Casey Corrales with the American Akaushi Association. Right now, thank you to our sponsor of this segment, the American Simmental Association. And they really have worked hard to provide some very fundamental changes to help ranchers move their operations forward, providing pedigree knowledge with actual performance records, and now some very advanced genomics, which we've talked about here on the Working Ranch Radio Show. They're providing more predictability to you so that you can make management decisions that help put profitability back to you as the rancher. SimGenetics, profit through science. Find out more at simmental.org. Well, the Captain Tim O'Byrne is back at the desk and working. In fact, the latest issue of Working Ranch magazine, I have it in my hot hands right now, and looking forward to getting through that. But here he joins us today for this week's edition of Tim's 2 Cents.
Hey, Justin. Hey, everybody out there in Working Ranch Radio Land. I've always looked at Canada's beef production community as being just a little bit ahead of us. They have a different structure up there. They're a little bit tighter community, and they've come up with some pretty innovative things over the years, but this is kind of surprising to me. So I'm reading out of the Canadian Cattleman magazine, Lisa Gunther, she's the editor, and she writes in her commentary, "Are we ready for FMD?" And it's quite surprising because she states here that the Canadian cattle feeders, along with the rest of the beef industry, have been asking for a FMD vaccine bank for years up there in Canada. They've been petitioning for that in Canada, and apparently it hasn't come through. In theory, she reports, Canada has access to a North American vaccine bank located in, of all places, the United States. However, there aren't enough doses in that vaccine bank to handle outbreaks in both countries, and the Americans have established their own vaccine bank. So apparently here in the United States, we are ahead of the curve when it comes to FMD, should an outbreak occur here in the United States, and Canada is not. So Justin, let's dig down into that a little bit, see what they have to say. Back to you.
Thanks, Captain. And a while back, he and I had visited a little bit about doing an interview with the Canadian Cattlemen's Association. We're working on trying to get that set up to talk about animal traceability. And of course, foot and mouth kind of falls into that same conversation as well. So hoping to bring that to you at some point here down the road. Well, stay with us. When we come back, we're going to be talking about mineral program for your cattle as Dr. Jason Russell joins us. We'll be back on the Working Ranch Radio Show after this. You know, big cows come with big feed bills, which is why smart genetic selection can pay off in your cow herd. Did you know Simmental-influenced cows are an average 74 pounds lighter at maturity than Angus-sired counterparts, according to a recent U.S. Meat Animal Research Center study? Now, while Simmental is sized for more efficient gains, 20-year genetic trend lines also show the breed offers reliable calving ease, early growth, and cow longevity. That's a balanced herd built for profit. Sim Genetics, giving you more per head, period. Stand strong, Simmental. And we welcome you back here to the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills as we head now here into a topic of looking at a mineral package, a mineral program for our cattle. I know for a lot of us, or the cattle industry as a whole, a lot of us are in different production cycles. Some have maybe had calves on the ground for a month or two, others still a ways off. But nevertheless, it is a part of our ranching management program that we need to have a good understanding of. So joining me today to talk a little bit more about that, pleased to have with us Dr. Jason Russell. He's the technical beef nutritionist with ZenPro. And Dr. Russell, thanks for joining us here today on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Justin, I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, Dr. Russell, before we get into some of the specifics of this time of the year and what a lot of us ranchers are dealing with, some various things, I want to go first into looking at this, because when we look at a mineral program out there, I guess as you and I were talking before we went on air, I kind of subscribe to the theory that, you know, some is good, more is not always better. And I think when it really comes to down into our input costs of when we're working in our cattle, that we need to be very strategic in what we're doing. And I feel that mineral falls into this category of really being strategic in what we're doing. And so with that in mind, how do we approach as ranchers looking at the right method or the right step in developing or looking at a mineral program for our cattle?
You bet. I mean, there's a few things to think about. Obviously, we know that when we think about from a mineral standpoint, availability mineral and levels, concentrations of those minerals vary in our forages. They vary seasonally. They vary by species. And they'll vary, of course, by geography. What's so important is just to work with a local representative, from the feed company where you're getting your supplements, hopefully an individual that is familiar with the unique challenges and unique opportunities that your forage base can provide to your herd, and then look to just create or utilize a supplement that can complement your forages appropriately.
Mm-hmm. One of the things, Dr. Russell, is there's a lot of just generic mineral packages that you can go and you can purchase usually from your feed store, and then they'll say, well, or do you want this because it's more dialed into our geographical area? And that's something that you and I were talking about before, is that a lot of times we do need to have some mineral that's dialed into our geographical area. And so from that mindset, where would we go other than maybe the folks? I guess sometimes I'm a little nervous with asking the guys that are selling me the stuff for what they want, because you just kind of figure, well, maybe they're just trying to sell their product. So from a aspect of us stepping back and saying, okay, what is for our geographical area, what are we lacking or what do we need? Where's a good resource for that?
There's a lot of good resources out there, and we're talking geography, right? Mm-hmm. And so when I'm thinking about different geographies, I'm going to look a little bit to our extension resources within our state. A lot of really great extension resources across the country that can really provide a lot of great resources. They're very objective. And I think obviously it's all about pulling in information from more than one source. So lean on those extension resources, a lot of good websites out there, but then also utilize your local feed representatives as well. And collectively, should be able to really kind of compile a thorough view of how you can complement your forages and give your herd the best nutrition possible.
Mm-hmm. As we were talking before we started on air here a little bit, we were talking about the fact that when we get into being very strategic with our mineral programs, we do need to take that time to figure out what we are lacking in there. But at the same time, we can also spend so much time, if we're not careful, kind of as they say too, you're spending a dime to save a nickel. Sometimes with our mineral programs, do you feel like that's something that we need to be cautious of so that we're not going too overboard with some of that kind of stuff and just utilizing the resources that we have?
Exactly. So, we think about our macro minerals. When I think about forage analysis, to me, macro mineral analysis periodically can be worthwhile. Certainly, if we're bringing in a lot of purchased hay, if we can pull a representative sample, I'm going to look at our macro minerals, which are our calcium, our phosphorus, magnesium, see where we need to be there. Again, work with our local feed representative to determine what supplement would complement that and meet needs, not only for adequate performance, but also for optimum performance. Where I think we lose the forest for the trees is if we're doing frequent forage analysis and trying to fine tune a mineral program. I'm afraid we oftentimes, certainly given the average cow herd size in the U.S., by the time we look at the cost of mineral over a year relative to the cost of forage analysis, if we're not careful, we can spend more money on forage analysis to fine tune a mineral program to what we perceive as our specific needs than we're actually saving by utilizing just a good, well-balanced mineral.
Mm-hmm. Let's get more specific into this time of the year. And I'd visited with you a couple months ago down in New Orleans, and we were at the cattle convention. And at that particular time, of course, we were still a ways off from, maybe just a few folks calving around the country. But at this point in the year, we're going to have guys that are all across the board in terms of where they're at in their production cycles, with them calving, have been calves on the ground for a couple months to some maybe a month or so out from getting calving. Let's first look at mineral through pregnancy. And look at that stage, because then we'll get into the next phase after those calves have been born. When we look at that, there's been, as you and I talked down in New Orleans, a lot of study, a lot of research done in that third trimester nutrition and how important that is. But let's just let's maybe go a little bit further than third trimester, and let's talk about a good mineral program during pregnancy of these cows.
Sure. So, some of the things we talked about, when we look at some of the research that's been done over the past few years here, it's really gotten a lot of attention. The fetal programming concept, as well as from Zenpro's standpoint, the generation nutrition concept. What impact can trace minerals have fed to that dam on the ultimately on the offspring performance and health down the road? We've seen some cool work out of Oregon State just a few years ago, feeding that cow to that last trimester, like you mentioned, and we see improvements in long-term calf health, calves that stay healthier all the way through the feedlot, calves that wean heavier. And that was just from mom's nutrition. That was from providing those cows during that last trimester with a better source of zinc, of manganese, of copper, and cobalt. Stepping further into a pregnancy from that study, most recently here, just in the past couple of years, some work out of Texas A&M University, feeding those cows during the middle and the last trimester. And the real focus was what impacts can maternal nutrition have on female development in terms of female offspring, if we look at those replacement heifers. And what was super cool was we saw heifers that reached puberty 19 days earlier, 19 days younger, almost a full cycle, when their mothers were fed Zenpro's complex trace minerals, Zenprovale 4. And so really what it told us was that we can have impacts not only on weaning weight and on health, but we can actually impact long-term reproductive development by improving mineral source to those pregnant females.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting because there's a lot of dollars in that when you say if it's a 19 days about, that you've seen that. If you figure pound and a half a day a gain on a calf, that's a pretty significant difference in a weaning weight on a calf. I find it interesting when you're talking about that, Dr. Russell, because, and this is not necessarily in your specific area, but it is a topic that is big in the cattle industry right now, and that is some genomic testing. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, we DNA tested about 100 head of our own heifer calves. And I find it interesting because we can get all of that genetic information, but at the same time, that doesn't necessarily dictate what those animals are going to do. And when you talk about some of the things through that nutrition as calves and move through life in their first year with a good health program, that's going to probably help to exploit what your knowledge is on this genomic testing. And I know this is something we didn't necessarily talk about, but I find there's some interesting sort of tie there a bit.
Well, and I think it really gets to, I mentioned that almost a full cycle younger at puberty. Mm-hmm. And the reason, at first glance, at surface level, it's like, okay, cool. They hit puberty earlier. But if we take a step back and we go, okay, what are the ramifications of that? Yeah. And what's exciting to me is, we can put more selection emphasis on other traits besides just picking the biggest and the oldest, the heaviest heifers for our replacement pen. If we've got females that are hitting puberty earlier, we can dig a little deeper into that heifer pool. And I think that's what really gives us a lot of opportunity, as you're talking about, where we've identified females that are genotypically more superior. And now if we also are able to utilize those females and keep within our scheduled breeding season, because those females are pubertal and they are cycling, I think those really work hand in hand. And then you mentioned health. Obviously, anything we can do to keep all our cattle healthy, especially those high value genetics, we especially want to keep those individuals healthy. And if we can do that through nutrition, rather than, like you said, getting cattle brought to the chute or roped for treating, it's all the better.
Yeah, you bet. Dr. Jason Russell, he's a technical beef nutritionist with ZinPro, is my guest here today. We have one more segment with Dr. Russell. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about that prevention element that comes, that they feel is important with a good mineral program. And also, I know for a lot of folks, last year was pretty droughty for folks. We were in drought a couple years ahead of that. And as we move into different times of the year and we're dealing with more wetter climates or drier situations, how do we adjust, or should we be adjusting, and what should we be looking at? We're going to talk about that when we come back here on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Set up the next generation for a productive lifetime with ZinPro Avela 4. Achieve productive success in your cows with 20% increased conception rate and a 16-day tighter calving interval. Calves from cows supplemented with ZinPro hit the ground running with improved immunity and 28 more pounds at weaning. Allow your cows and calves to perform to their full potential with ZinPro Avela 4.
And welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills. My guest today is Dr. Jason Russell, technical beef nutritionist with ZinPro. Dr. Russell, in the first segment, we were talking a bit about that third trimester nutrition on these pregnant cows. Let's get into post-pregnancy, and there's a lot of other things that come with that, because and I'm not going to talk just cows, I'm going to talk our herd in general. It could be some yearlings that we're putting out on grass, or whether it's these cows that we're trying to get ready to go for breed back. But when it comes to this, it's pretty important that we get these cattle, especially in a time of year where there's typically more moisture in the ground, and the health-wise of our herd has a lot to do with what these cows have in terms of trace mineral.
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially as we get into freeze-thaw cycles and we start to look at foot rot concerns. And, we've seen over the course of several studies and countless anecdotes over the years that especially zinc can play such a crucial role in integrity of that hoof and integrity of that skin. And so maintaining a better source of zinc in those animals through nutrition can really help to fend off some of the challenges of foot rot, of hairy heel wart, and other issues that we deal with, because health starts from the ground up. with our animals.
Of course, in certain areas, having some ability for these cows to get to magnesium as well. I know in our part of the country, if they're on too much green grass too quick, we can have some issues there. And I mean, just the balanced program in general is pretty critical.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's trace minerals, but it's macros like magnesium as well, recognizing the challenges we get into in a lush forage situation and in a lactating female, animals that just are not able to mobilize enough magnesium in time, and we get some of those tetany symptoms. So, definitely crucial to work with the local feed representative and look at options when tetany is a concern. Look at options for getting a high mag, as we call it, mineral in preparation for preventing those sorts of challenges.
You bet. Something that we talked about at the break and when we first started talking about our doing a program here on minerals, it wasn't anything that we pinpointed on, but it came up in our discussion at break, and I thought it was really, really relevant because that is the mineral program and making sure our bulls are adequately taken care of. I mean, for a lot of different reasons, whether it's, getting on it right now and get them tested. But at the same time, the last thing we want for the amount of dollars that some folks are spending on bulls is to look out there after they've been out there for 15, 20 days and they're carrying a front right foot or a front left foot. And you go out there and you see it swelled up only to see that, we forgot about our bulls.
Yeah, I mean, it's on the one hand, I'll say it's easy to forget, right? The bulls are only 4 to 5% of our cow herd. But at the same time, this goes without saying, they're 50% of the breeding equation. And so you talk about an automatic ROI in terms of investments in a quality mineral program. If we do a good job of simply getting a good mineral, whether that's in a loose mineral, a tub, a liquid, in a TMR, whatever that may be, out to our bull battery, and we're talking a few months before, right? Spermatogenesis takes 61 days. We need to be improving mineral to those bulls long before that. But if we can get a good mineral program in front of our bulls in preparation for that breeding season, not only are we bringing in, a better quality zinc that's going to improve that hoof and hoof integrity and improve mobility of those bulls, but also we talk about sperm motility. I mean, work has been done in an academic setting showing that if we can improve mineral to those bulls prior to summer breeding and the heat and heat stress associated with summer breeding, we can help to better maintain sperm motility. So, I mean, to me, I think a lot about trace minerals, both not only in the foot, but also in the motility of our sperm to get those cows settled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and you're right. I mean, it is something I'm guilty of it. You have the bulls off in another pasture. You don't think anything of it. They're gaining weight. They're looking good, but they're not necessarily having to work hard out there. And the thing that's frustrating is once they've been through that and maybe that foot rot has gotten quite a ways down the road before you've caught it, you've just limited the lifespan of that bull.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we might get them recovered, but we're never going to quite have the same athlete that we were hoping to have to cover the amount of miles and the number of cows that we had expected.
Mm-hmm. I want to real quick touch on just something else, and we don't have to go too deep in it because I know it's a little bit outside of what we initially talked about. But you and I talked at the break or before we started on air here today. There's a lot of different parts of the country that are coming out of extreme situations, whether it was drought. Probably not too many were extreme wet across the country last year, but they were definitely a lot of drought areas and areas that had been droughty the years prior to that. When you look at those kind of situations as a producer, is there something we need to be aware of or something that could change because we've come out of those extreme situations?
Painting with a broad brushstroke, anytime our forage quality is poor, it's safe to assume that by and large, mineral availability is also poor. We get into more mature forages, we're going to see more lignification, which, just essentially tells us that we've got poor forage digestibility. But that's not only, talking about macronutrients, we're tying up or holding on to trace nutrients to a greater degree. And so when we talk about, coming out of challenging forage environments like that, really that is an appropriate time to go ahead and pull a forage analysis, see what we're looking at, and really lean on those resources that we talked about earlier to balance out a program that will help to shore up any inadequacies in our forage base.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Russell, we talked a little bit at the beginning about leaning on these resources or finding some of these resources. Let's go back to that real quick. I know with Zinpro, you have the Avail4 products, and there's a lot of good partners out there that you guys work with that can help folks in moving the direction and really getting what we talked about here today, analyze and geographical elements and come together with a program that's going to help what they've got going on.
You bet. So certainly we do our best to provide a lot of different resources related to trace mill nutrition and other production aspects at zinpro.com. That's zinpro.com. That's also going to give you the opportunity to identify the account manager or sales representative in your area that can help you to find a local feed dealer that carries Zinpro Avail4 and other Zinpro products. But certainly we've got a lot of great partners, both national feed manufacturers as well as more localized manufacturers that carry Zinpro products, that put them into supplements at the full research proven rate. So yeah, a lot of opportunity out there to find a Zinpro product that complements your forage and serves your herd well.
Mm-hmm. Real quick here, and I know we're a ways off from, it just seems like we've spent a lot of our focus here today talking about the spring of the year, but really for a lot of us, we're working 12 months out. So it's not out of the question to be looking at fall. And then we're back into what we had talked about with that nutrition program through pregnancy. So you talked about some of your partners and mixing it in some things in some different supplements that you have. Expand on that just a little bit more, because I think we also, like I said, in a point where we're thinking further out than just maybe the next couple months, we're also thinking about what our feed costs are going to be next fall as well.
Yeah. And Justin, as you and I had chatted about off the air, it's really about being strategic. If we utilize for example, a mineral form that is better utilized by the animal, we don't have to feed as high a levels. We can really try to pinpoint the amounts that are going to help fuel optimum performance. But we also, you and I talked about consumption. The most expensive, supplement in the world is the one that's overconsumed. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we're providing, if we provide an ingredient like Avail4 that has a lot of research behind it, that's all well and good unless that supplement's not consumed. So it really is crucial to not only identify in your area what supplements you can get out to those animals on a regular basis, on a prescribed basis, or it's also keeping some records. Are your cows consuming, say, a loose mineral or a tub on average at the rate they're supposed to get the prescribed amount of nutrients in there and ingredients like Avail4? The best mineral in the world isn't doing much if it's not eaten, but also the best mineral in the world isn't doing much if it's still sitting on the pallet in the shed because it never made it out to the mineral feeder. Mm-hmm.
Well, Dr. Russell, I sure appreciate you joining us. Before we head out, just some final comments from you.
My big thing is, I think I've probably already hammered on it quite a bit. Good minerals are great, but if they sit in the shed and they don't go in the mineral feeder, if those tubs sit on a pallet in the shed and they don't go out in the pasture, they're not doing a lot of good. Mm-hmm. It seems so simple, but it's a challenge, and it's a challenge seasonally, right? We get into hay season, we get into busy times of the year. Yeah. A good recommendation is at least allocate one person on the operation to be in charge of that, just to ensure that we're getting supplement out to those cows, that we're, that's a big part of strategy, right? It's just making sure that these supplements that we've invested in, that we've both time and research as well as dollars, that we're getting out to the herd. And then I think finally just emphasizing that, minerals are needed throughout the year. Mm-hmm. So often we talk about breeder minerals, but at the end of the day, there is not a time in that cow's year, in her annual cycle, that she's not preparing for some sort of upcoming stress, whether she knows it or not. Mm-hmm. And so where we're able to geographically, it's crucial to really keep mineral in front of our cow herd year round.
You bet. So the investment of good mineral feeders is probably something to be aware of too.
Absolutely.
Well, Dr. Russell, again, I want to thank you for joining us. Appreciate having you on the program here today.
Thank you, Justin. I appreciate the opportunity to chat.
Dr. Jason Russell, technical beef nutritionist with Zenpro, joining us here today to talk on this program of minerals. And I will tell you, for myself personally, this has been a subject that I've evolved with over the last several years. And if you've listened to my program much at all, you know that I tend to probably be a little bit more of a minimalist and wanting and pushing folks to really analyzing what you're putting into your cattle herds and trying to figure out to see, are you getting that return for what you're putting in? Are you getting that return on investment? And as I've evolved over the last several years, and I've tried to educate myself and also having conversations with other producers that I highly value their opinion because they're running their ranch in a profitable mindset, the mineral programs is something that has come back and kind of surfaced a little bit. And so I encourage you to do your own research, to look about that. As Dr. Russell was mentioning, visit with your local extension agent, your local professionals as well, and develop and looking at that. And again, I mean, really, as he said, one of the worst things you can do is to get on a mineral program and to see overconsumption going on, or it's still sitting in the barn in the bags and not utilizing it all. So some good advice from Dr. Russell on that, and I encourage you to really take this into consideration. You know, we talked about the cows, the bulls as well, some really good points there that we talked about. So keep that in mind and encourage you to do your own research on this. Again, if you want to find out more, you can go to zenpro.com, and within that website there's a tab for beef as well. So a good topic here today that I think values some time and consideration on your behalf. Well, stay with us. Coming up after the break, we step into the breed spotlight. As this week we focus on the American Akaushi breed. Yeah, if you've ever wanted to know more about this breed of cattle that originated out of Japan, well, stay with us. Casey Corrales with the American Akaushi Association joins us as we find out more about this breed of cattle. We'll be back on the Working Ranch Radio Show after this.
Don't keep your cow-calf herd data in a notebook. Keep it in the cloud with Performance Ranch and say so long to decoding handwritten notes. Performance Ranch is an easy-to-use app that simplifies record keeping and makes decision-making easier. Keep track of herd inventory, monitor health records, and manage costs, all from your iPad or iPhone. Group texting important herd data? Delete it. Use Performance Ranch instead. Go to performancelivestockanalytics.com and be the first to know when Performance Ranch is ready to launch.
And we welcome you back here to the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills. Glad to have you joining us for our program today as we head now into a special feature today in this segment called our Breed Spotlight. We haven't done these in a while, but I always find it quite interesting. And today is no different because we're going to be learning about a breed of cattle that I know some folks might have a little bit of familiarity with, but probably not as much as we do other breeds. And it's the Akaushi breed. And joining us today is Casey Corrales, who's the executive director of the American Akaushi Association. And Casey, thanks for joining us here today on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Well, thank you, Justin. It's very much a pleasure to visit with y'all today a little bit about the Akaushi breed.
You bet. And I'm excited, too, because I think there's really some interest. I mean, it's something probably people have heard. You guys have done a pretty decent job of marketing and getting the name out there. But at the same time, people are not totally familiar. Now, we are hearing a little bit more and more these days. There's a little bit more marketing out there in terms of, and I'm going to use this phrase, Wagyu, but we'll talk about the difference of that in just a bit. But first of all, let's talk about the American Akaushi breed and touch on it briefly about kind of how it got started and where this started here in the U.S.
Yeah, so in 1994, the Foundation Akaushi breeding herd was brought to the United States from Japan. So yes, Akaushi is a Japanese breed of cattle, and a small set of females and bulls were actually brought over. And what grew the Foundation herd, or what has grown into the American Akaushi, is that just embryo transfer, since it was such a small group that came over. And from that embryo transfer, we were able to bring out the genetic lines through the Tamamaru, Shigemaru, and Hikari lines, and cross those with the different Foundation females that came over, in which now we were able to now incorporate some Judo and Rushaw into those breeds to make sure we keep our inbreeding coefficients down. So yes, a very small group that came over, a very nice set of females and bulls that came over, which it has grown into what we are today.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I would encourage you, we're not going to get into the full detail of the history, but I will tell you, I read through the history of how the Japanese cattle came into the U.S., and it is very fascinating. And I would encourage folks, if you want to find out more, go to their website, read more about it, akaushi.com. Now, we're not done yet, though, because here's the thing, too, Casey, because I know when we start talking about this, really what people in the frame of mind where people are at here today is they think Wagyu. I mean, we're seeing some marketing through some fast food companies in regards to that. We're seeing some of these high-end restaurants with that. So then let's look then at the difference. When we say Akaushi and Wagyu, there is a difference there. So explain what we're talking about there.
Right. So Wagyu just means Japanese cow. Mm-hmm. There are 4 breeds that fall under the Wagyu umbrella, which are the Akaushi, the blacks, which are Krohishi, Japanese polled, and Japanese shorthorn. Mm-hmm. Those are the 4 main breeds that fall under the term Wagyu.
Okay. So when I was looking at that, it's kind of similar when we talk about, and I know you're a livestock judger from way back, so you know what I'm talking, and a lot of folks will know this. When we talk British breeds, that's talking about a certain area of country. Continental breeds, similar right. As you just explained there. Wagyu is really the origin of where the cattle came from, correct?
Correct. That is correct. Yes. So the Akaushi came from the Kumamoto prefecture of Japan.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm pretty impressed with how you can just say some of these names, because I'm glad you're having to say some of them.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
So then let's get into some of these breeds. You talked about 4 different Wagyu breeds, and so let's talk about the difference. What makes Akaushi breed different from those others?
Right. So Akaushi, as well as the Black Wagyu, we all know that they're known for just really high quality, tender, tasty beef, which we all have. I guess I'm pretty spoiled on it. I've been eating it for a while, and my 2 kids have grown up on it, and they love Akaushi beef. And so besides being known for just marbled, tender, consistent beef, they're also really good in terms of important production traits as growth, fertility, vigor, and longevity. These cattle are all over the United States. We have some in Wyoming, Idaho, the Dakotas, all the way to the Gulf Coast, to California, Hawaii, and also international. So these cattle, in terms of production traits and being functional cattle for your operation, they do very well in all kinds of environments.
Mm-hmm. And we are starting to see a little bit more of that. Of course, most of it is going to be in a crossbred situation because we just don't have the size of herds. I'm sure there's a few full-bred herds out there, probably not many, or 15, 16s and so forth. But we're starting to see a lot of interest in, putting sires on these commercial type cattle out there. Is that what you guys are seeing?
Yes, sir. A lot of people here in the States do use Akaushi cattle for more of a terminal cross. There are quite a few branded beef programs out there that are sourcing back those Akaushi sired calves and really just putting a really good high premium on those feeder cattle as well as fat cattle. So a lot of people have those cow bases that are unique and important to their environment, that strive in that environment. And a lot of people just take those Akaushi bulls or AI sires and use semen in their breeding programs, and they're able to generate those F1 calves that are just highly sought after right now.
Mm-hmm. So my question, Casey, is a little bit is on that. Are you seeing very much retention of heifers? So let's say you have that F1 cross and guys keeping some heifers back and then going back again on a Akaushi bull or some sort. Are you seeing much of that happen, or is there pretty much terminal type situations?
Right. So it really just depends on your operation goals. Are you more of a terminal operation where you just send everything, to the feed yard, or are you kind of trying to build up your herd, and especially to those purebreds, maybe working up to a polled purebred, which are pretty hot commodity today. So just depending on what you're doing, I have a lot that just sell everything as feeder cattle, and I do have some of our breeders and members that do keep back some females. I think that F1 female is very very well, a very good type female, especially if you're having any type of American cross cow base. It really cleans up their udders and their underlines, and just really helps in adding value to your next generation of those 3/4, and if you keep back your 7/8 and 15/16 females that you can keep back that are well aware of what's going on in that environment, and you're not having to worry about trying to find any other type of replacement females to live in that environment.
Casey, I really want to talk a little bit about these calves, because I know that's something that people will think about. Oh, they're like, okay, maybe they've heard stories. What's the vigor in these boogers? Are they going to get up and go, and are they going to handle some of these different environments that we just talked about there? And how are they going to grow out and those kinds of things? Let's talk about these calves and what you're finding.
So Akaushi are known for calving ease. A lot of people do use these bulls on their first calf heifers, knowing that those calves do have value somewhere down the chain, instead of using a Corriente or a Longhorn, especially down here in Texas, where you would get docked for using that type of a sire. Not trying to hurt that breed or anything, but at least using an Akaushi that you do have some value in that calf. So these calves, I've heard from our breeders that they are spunky little things, that they are, low birth weight in the 60s to maybe 70, depending on your cow age and cow size. So they do hop up, they're vigor, they're thrifty, they're ready to survive. I get all kinds of pictures of these calves being born in the snow and they're getting up. As long as that cow has been able to maintain her milking production, and the cow is getting the right adequate nutrients and stuff, that those calves should grow along just fine. I know a lot of people might worry about their weaning weights, especially if they're used to a Charolais type sire. We will not be as heavy as that. But as long as that cow's being maintained and doing her job, you shouldn't lose any type of weaning weight that you should be accustomed to.
So let's talk about demand, because we are seeing from a marketing side of things, from the restaurants, both high-end restaurants and even some fast food chains. What are you seeing? Are we seeing a real pretty good strong demand showing on this?
Oh, yes, sir. It is crazy to see. I started in the Akaushi breed in 2009, and here we are 2023, and the demand has just blossomed and it's exploded, from not very many people knowing what the breed is and what they do to now where it's these branded beef programs and these other buyers are just basically in these bidding wars, which is really good for the commercial guy or C-stock guy. They're just having so much value to these calves being able or using Akaushi bulls. And I just see the demand staying so strong, especially now that these restaurants are pushing this really high quality beef. And I think that more and more people are going to want to have a better beef eating experience. And then that's just going to be more and more increase for Akaushi bulls and those calves.
Well, I know there's been a lot of growth in the breed. You look back into 1993 when 180 head of cattle came across, and then they stopped that from happening anymore. And you guys have grown. I know the association itself, almost 800 ranchers across the U.S. In 44 different states. If folks want to know more about this, because I know there's going to be folks that say, man, I'd like to know more. We talked about the website a little bit. Give us more information, what that website is, and where they can go to find out more information.
Right. Well, we would love to have y'all visit our website. It's just www.akaushi.com. That's AKAUSHI. And we would love to also visit with you. All of our contact information is on our website, and that'll get you to any type of information that you're looking for, the breed history, any of marketing information. We have a catalog listing where breeders have cattle for sale. Our membership directory is linked onto our website. as well as any informational articles that have been written here lately.
You bet. Well, there's a lot to learn on it, and it's really interesting information. It's interesting to see how this has continued to grow. And I'm just speaking from my own experience. We've been using Japanese type cattle on our heifers this is going on year 3, and I'm seeing the demand that you're seeing as well, Casey, on that. And I sure appreciate you joining us here today on the Working Ranch Radio Show to give us a little bit more information about the Akaushi Association and the breed.
Yes, it's really fun visiting with you. And like I said, if you have any questions about the Akaushi or our association, we would love to visit with you.
All right. Casey Corellis, Executive Director for the American Akaushi Association, joining us here today to give us a little bit more information in our breed spotlight about the Akaushi breed. And very interesting, I thought. Again, their website, if you want to find out more, is akaushi.com. That's spelled AKAUSHI.com. Well, stay with us. Coming up next, meteorologist Don Day joins us as we take a look at our long-term weather when we return on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Do you have a young child, grandchild, niece, or nephew that loves the weather and wants to learn more? Day Weather has produced a children's weather journal full of weather facts, fun weather experiments, coloring pages, and pages to record weather observations for every season of the year. The weather journal is for ages 3 to 7 and designed to be fun and educational. The interactive weather projects are fun for the whole family to take part in. For only $10, the Day Weather Journal is a great gift idea for any occasion. Click on our Amazon link to order at dayweather.com.
And welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show. Justin Mills here with you as we head now into taking a look at our long-term weather. And joining us is meteorologist Don Day. And Don, as we were talking before we went on air here, I was kind of scratching my head. Where do we start? Because I feel like as we look into this coming week, it's just more of what we've had. And I know something that you have been talking about a little bit in your weather video casts is that we're seeing temperatures here for the month of March quite a bit below average. And I was joking with you about the fact that it's hard for me to realize that because it's still warmer than what we had in February, but we are seeing colder temperatures really across the U.S., which of course then a lot of things. We're seeing more accumulation of snow, no runoff, and then of course it's also slowing the growing season as well.
Well, it is. I mean, obviously the extra sunlight you get this time of year helps, but the green up, or the where we start to get into where we wanted the grasses to start to grow, from the northern plains to the west coast and from British Columbia to Mexico, the whole western side of North America not only has had a very cold March, but on the whole, since the winter started, has been far below normal. But we're kind of seeing the epicenter of the coldest temperatures across Montana, Wyoming, up into North Dakota, parts of South Dakota, to where the storm systems that are coming in are mostly still producing snow. We still got a lot of frozen ground out there. The calving seasons are underway. And you had mentioned at the beginning that it's kind of been like the same weather pattern. Well, you can listen to the podcast 2 weeks ago, and I'll tell you the same thing I told you 2 weeks ago, which is more storms for California and more unsettled weather coming into the west and the northern plains.
Mm-hmm. And with that, one of the things too is we look at all this happening, and we had talked about it previously as well in looking at the flooding potential that's out there. And now, as you and I were talking before, it's even looking like that potential just keeps going up and up, especially when we're not getting runoff and we're just keep adding more snowpack.
That's right. Usually you start to get some melting this time of year that kind of draws down that snowpack. But you start looking at the snowfall totals that have happened in some of the upper areas of the Midwest. I was talking to somebody last week, and parts of it are going between 90 to 100 inches of snow. And so you're talking about getting into some areas where there's a lot of snow to melt. And when spring comes, if it warms up quickly and we get a lot of rain with that, well, from the northern plains to the interior west to the west coast, we've already had some flooding problems. There's going to be more flooding concerns coming.
Mm-hmm. So when we look at the trajectory of these storms, it's still continuing to sort of isolate, though, those southern plains or southern part of the country, which is if you were to just draw maybe an upside down L, it would include Texas and all the way over to Florida. We're still seeing some pretty dry, hot conditions there.
Yeah, the southeast United States has been the opposite. And that's what happens when you have these anomalies where you have one area that's really cold. Next door to that really cold spot, you're going to have where it's the opposite. And that's what's going on in the southern plains and the southeastern areas of the United States. Now, we're seeing some rain that will be coming into the southeastern United States, the eastern part of the southern plains. But boy, the latest drought monitor that just came out really shows this north-south area of still very bad drought conditions that extend up from central and west Texas, far eastern New Mexico, through Kansas, especially Kansas, then into Nebraska. Then the far eastern counties of Wyoming and Colorado are still very much in a drought situation because a lot of these California storms are losing their moisture over the Rockies. And by the time they get to the plains and the southern plains, there's not as much left over. However, and I think we talked about this last week, as we get into the last days of March, as we get into April, we start to see some opportunities for those southern plains to probably have better chances of beneficial moisture. Hopefully it's going to be in the form of liquid. But those areas, I think, are going to start to get some benefit from this active pattern that's across at least the far western areas.
Mm-hmm. Let's look a little bit at the Midwest and maybe even further east of there and the Ohio, Tennessee Valley areas, because these storms have come down. They've kind of bounced off of the Four Corners area of the Southwest and then kind of back up towards the Northeast. Are we seeing the precipitation in those areas as well?
Yeah, we will. Now, I would say that that's one area that we need to watch as we go into spring and summer to see if there's the tendency for maybe some drier conditions to develop. Not saying that's going to happen, but we kind of need to watch it because coming out of a La Nina, we've kind of seen that before in the spring and early summer for that part of the country. But what will happen as we get into April, you start to see weather systems speed up and traverse the country fairly quickly. And that's where you tend to get the line of showers and thunderstorms that can kind of come in a day or two and drop a good amount of rain. And then you have some, good fair weather coming in behind it. So the drought areas we're most concerned about, the driest areas, are still into those southern plains areas. Boy, you look at the drought status in southwest and south central Kansas, southwestern Kansas. That's kind of ground zero right now. More than 40% of California now is out of drought. So what we need to do now is see if we can get some of that California moisture to get over the divide and into the areas that really need it.
Yeah, kind of get it shifted a little bit to the east there for sure. So, well, Don, I appreciate you joining us here with a look at our long-term weather.
Thanks for having me.
Again, that's meteorologist Don Day with a look at our weather. You can find his website at dayweather.com, and from there is a link to his daily video podcast that he kicks out. It's on YouTube as well, that he kicks out every Monday through Friday morning. Stay with us. We'll put a wrap on this week's show when we come back on the Working Ranch Radio Show. Cattle producers, here's a way to put more dollars in your pocket. Put the Amafirm advantage found in all Gain Smart mineral to work in your cow herd. Amafirm is the industry leader in increasing fiber digestion. In fact, research shows putting Amafirm to work increases forage utilization by 10%, reducing overall forage costs and allowing you to graze more animals per acre. That's a big-time return on your investment. To find which Gain Smart mineral formula is right for your herd, visit gainsmart.com. Coming up on next week's edition of the Working Ranch Radio Show, we're going to be talking with a couple folks from the Good Grazing Makes Sense program. Now, this is a collaborative effort that is providing some great resources to us as ranchers, and we'll talk about it next week and how you can take advantage and utilize this program for your own operation as well. So be sure to join us next week. By the way, if you want to go back and listen to any previous shows, our website for the show is workingranchradio.com. That's the podcast site. You can go back and listen. Now, if you have a question, you want to reach out to me, you can send me an email at justin.workingranch@gmail.com. By the way, the Working Ranch Radio Show is a production of Working Ranch Magazine, branded #1 by America's Ranchers. And if you don't have your April-May issue in your hot hands right now, I encourage you to go to the website at workingranchmag.com and you can get your subscription started today. Well, we thank you for joining us here this week. Be sure to join us at the same time, same place, or on your favorite podcast provider. I'm your host, Justin Mills, and until next time, keep your chin down and your mind in the middle. So long.